Okay, so good morning, everybody. Good to be together on Zoom. And yesterday we got up to the second Mishnah. Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. For those who were here, those who weren't, the recording should be available online, I believe. So we're on Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. So yesterday was a Mishnah dealing with the Ktovet Ka'aka, dealing with tattoos. We spoke about that, about the chiyuv would be only if one had both done the made the incision and put in the ink as well. I saw a difference of opinion in the Rishonim as to what order it was done, whether that's significant or not. Probably either way, one would be chayav if one first put in the ink and then made the cut, or first made the cut and then put in the ink. But we saw that both of those were necessary in order to be chayav Makkot. We spoke about some contemporary shilas that come up regarding tattoos. We saw that really this is an issue which comes from, it's related to Avodah Zarah. There was an opinion in the Mishnah that one would only be chayav Malkut if one had tattooed the name of Avodah Zarah. The Mishnah first said until you have the shame, and the Gemara discussed what does that mean. Shichtov Hashem does not mean Shem Hashem. It means in this case shame of Avodah Zarah. We saw how the Rambam relates this mitzvah directly to this prohibition, directly to Avodah Zarah, and we saw some discussions that come as a result of that. So now, move on to the next Mishnah, something a little bit different. The first few Mishnayot of the Perek, as we've seen, have gone through, given us a list of different mitzvot, or different averot, I should say, for which one would get different prohibitions, for which one would get malkot if one performed them. And as a result of that, we had a discussion about sometimes when a person can get multiple sets of malkot for doing one thing. So we saw the example by a shrita or by karcha, if somebody makes a wound for a mate. So if somebody was to make 5 different wounds over one mate, that would be 5 different sets of malkot. Alternatively, if somebody was to make one wound for 5 different meitim, that would also be 5 sets of malkut. So based on that, the Gemara now picks up, the Mishnah talks about a similar sort of topic, whereby, we actually quoted this Mishnah earlier on, whereby a person is doing either, there is one action, one continuous action, which a person does. Would one get multiple sets of malkut for that, even though it's only one thing, but you keep doing it? So at what point does that sort of kick in? And then the Mishnah is going to talk about sort of the converse of it, which is in one action, how many malkut you could get. It gives us Mishnah will give us an example, and the Gemara will give us others, whereby in one action a person is actually transgressing maybe 7 or 8 different isurim, and we'll get malkut for each of those with one thing which they've done. So says the Mishnah. It's near the bottom of the page, about 6-7 lines up from the bottom. Mishnah says, Nazir, shaya shote yain kol hayom, ein chayav ela achat. Okay, so we're going to begin talking about a Nazir. With a Nazir, there are 3 separate isurim that once a person becomes a Nazir, that they accept upon themselves, that they cannot eat, they cannot drink wine, or any sort of wine derivatives. The pasuk says, chometz yain v'chometz shechar, lo yishteh v'chom mishrat anavim, meaning anything that's had any drink that's had grapes really inside, lo yishteh v'anavim lachim v'veshim lo yachal, and cannot eat grapes at all. V'chatzanim v'adzag lo yochel. Interestingly, these psukim are used; they come up very, very important in Isur v'Heter in terms of Hilchot Kashrut. There are long sugyas in the Gemara talking about the idea of tam keikar. By the way, this is one of the sources of it. We have a principle in Isur v'Heter, in Hilchot Kashrut, where we say ta'am keikar, which means that the taste of a food is like the original food. This is why, of course, we need separate pots and pans for meat and milk, for all sorts of things. Why we can't just use the same thing, because even when the pots are cleaned out, you still have the taste which is absorbed in the walls, and the taste that goes into the food. That's as if the food is there itself. One of the places that's learned out from this principle, this idea, and lots of discussions in the Gemara, discussions in the Rishonim, but it's learned out from the din of the Nazir, from this pasuk. In any event, that is the first prohibition on the Nazir is in terms of drinking wine. The second prohibition is in terms of shaving his hair. says the pasuk says, "Kol yemei neder nizrot tar lo yavar rosho." Nazir may not shave hair until the end of the period. And finally, shaloi tamei lamet, that he should not come into contact with a corpse. So those are the three different isurim. A person takes on themselves a vow of nazirut; they're not allowed to do any of these things. So you have a nazir shaya shotei yain kol yom. Now, for the entire period of the nazirut, they're not allowed to drink wine. So every time they drink wine is another violation. So says the Mishnah, he was sitting, this Nazir, why would he become a Nazir if he's going to be drinking wine all day? I don't know. But Nazir shaya shotei yain kol hayom, ein chayav elachat. He's only going to be chayav Makkot once. Right? And again, every time we assume that there's a chiyuv Makkot, so then there are edim and hatra'ah, otherwise it couldn't be. So there are witnesses. They came and they warned him. They said, "You're a Nazir, you know you're not allowed to drink wine." He says, "I know, and I'm doing it." So he drank wine all day. So Nazir shaya shotei yain kol hayom, doesn't matter how much he drank, ein chayav elachat. He's only going to be chayav once. However, amru lo al tishteh v'hu shoteh, if throughout the day they said to him, right, the witnesses, they said to him, don't drink. In other words, there was more than one hatra'ah. So even though it's the same action, it's the same isur, but each time he does it, it is a new isur. And it's going to be a new isur, and therefore each time that they warn him and each time that he drinks, he's going to be chayav again. He's going to be chayav another set of malkot. So that's the difference. If it was just they'd warned him once, right? Only going to be chayav once. However, if amrula al tishteh, they warned him again and again, and each time, then he's going to be chayav on each and every one. Okay, that is regarding drinking wine. Now the Mishnah is going to tell us another couple of cases also related to the Nazir, and then another case that is not related to the Nazir. So case number 2, he came into contact with dead bodies. He came into tumat met. Right, and so when it says hayam tamei lemetim kol hayom, means that he came into contact with the corpse and then he left, and then he came into contact with the corpse again and then he left. Right, and this happened a number of times throughout the day. It's going to be the same as the previous case that we saw. He's only going to be chayav once. The same reason. Had one hatra'ah in the morning. Yeah, even though he's doing that action a number of times, he's only going to be chayav once. Amru lo al titma. But again, if he was warned, right, don't come into contact with the mate. And each time it was a new hatra'ah, and each time he did it again, right? He's therefore going to be chayav each and every time. Again, the third is, so we said he's not allowed to shave his hair. So he was shaving his hair again, and he was doing it all day. No chayav elachat, only going to be chayav once. Amrula al tegalech, he was warned, however, not to do it, and then he still goes ahead and does it each time. That is going to be chayav al kol achat v'achat. Same thing. Okay. Next case. Now, this case is not a case of a Nazir. Rivan points out, the last Rivan here on the Amud, he says, the bottom says, this is not telling us about a Nazir necessarily. This is talking about anybody. So you had a person who was ayalavush bekilayim. Somebody was wearing kilayim, kolayom, right? Shatnez, linen and wool together in the same beged, that is prohibited. He's only going to be chayav for it once. Chayav malkut once. Amrulo al tilbash. Again, if he had separate cases of hatra'ah, that each time they said to him al tilbash, and then each time he did it, each time he had hatra'ah, and then he performed the isur again. And each time he was told al tilbash, and he takes the clothes off and he puts them back on. He's going to be chayav al kol achat v'achat. Going to be chayav for each time that he goes, each time that he comes, and he puts those clothes back on. Right? If he just had them on and he didn't do anything, so he hasn't. He was already wearing the clothes. He'd already performed the isur, so he's not doing anything new. But if he's going to be taking them off each time, So the Gemara is going to discuss, what does it mean, poshet v'lovesh, each time? Does that mean if he just, took his hand out of the sleeve and put that back in, is that considered that he's putting it on? Or is it that he's actually literally taking off the garment and putting it back? Or maybe something else. We'll see shortly in the Gemara. So those are the 4 things.
Rabbi, excuse me. This is different than the 3 cases with the Nazir, because the Nazir is a metame for a mace. He doesn't say that he goes out and he comes in, he goes out and he comes in. And same thing with Megaleach. He just continues shaving. He doesn't stop. And if they tell him, don't shave, that's while he's shaving. It's not while he stops and then unless it is when he stops, but it doesn't say that.
So you're right. It doesn't say
different.
So you're right that it doesn't say that explicitly in the Mishnah. I mean, in the first case, it's clear, right? The first case, because where he's vushoteh, that would seem to be. So the Rishonim to discuss it a bit.
In the first case also, he can be drinking a humongous cup and he just continues drinking and drinking and drinking.
So So this is a discussion, meaning the Rishonim who understand that no, that it's dafka way if he stops and he goes back and he performs that action each time. We're going to see that the Gemara is going to discuss it regarding Hilayim, because we're going to see there is going to be an opinion that when it says poshet v'lovesh, right, that's seemingly the pshal where there are those who are going to say poshet v'lovesh, as in if he takes off the whole garment, he puts it back on. Like I said, I mentioned the sleeve or not. There's even going to be an opinion in the Gemara that no, it's not that he actually takes it off. It's that he waits the amount of time that it would take him to put it on. That's considered as if he does it. So we have we have the same thing. You're right. It's not explicit in the Mishnah, and it's a machloket rishonim, meaning there are rishonim that are going to understand that in each of these cases that what's required is that he goes back and he performs that action. And when he performs that action, that's when he's going to be chayav malkut again. Or there are others who understand that if he just carries on doing what he was doing, he doesn't have to stop. Like the case of, I guess the clearest difference would be in the case of metamei lemet. Essentially, are we looking at the transgression over here? We could spend a lot of time talking about this. Is it the action which one performs, or is it the outcome? Right, and what is a person going to be punished for? We discussed this a little bit yesterday in a different context. We discussed it yesterday in the where we spoke about the previous Mishnah, spoke about the prohibition of a tattoo. Right. So what is so there it's clear. There it's clear that there is a prohibition in terms of putting on the tattoo. But is there a prohibition as well of the outcome? Is there a prohibition of having the tattoo engraved in one's skin? And the nafkamina would be whether one is required to undo it, if that's possible. So we saw yesterday in the Chashukei Chemed, Rav Zilberstein brought some interesting cases. He brought the question of, let's say somebody who converted to Judaism, right, and they had a tattoo before they had converted, which is no prohibition because they were not Jewish. They didn't have there's no problem with that. But once they become Jewish, are they then required to now get rid of the tattoo? Is it the outcome that we're worried about? He brought from, there's a Minchat Chinuch, mentioned this yesterday. There's a Mincha Chinuch that says that if somebody was to remove the tattoo on Shabbos, that would be a tikkun, and therefore that would be an isuda, right? And if that would therefore be a tikkun, so then it would seem to be that one would be required to do it. So therefore we see it might be that it's the prohibition is not just the action, but is also the outcome. So if we say the same thing over here, where you say he's going to be metamei to meitim, if it's not just the action of going and being metamei, but it's the outcome, the fact that he is there in that status, so then you could say that where it says when they said to him al titma, and then he's tamei, he doesn't have to necessarily do anything, and he's already going to be chayav malkut. So I think there are Rishonim who learn like that. But again, there are others as well who learn that no, each time it means he removed himself from the mate, he came back. So we can see, so we do have both of those opinions, but you're right, it's not explicit in the Mishnah one way or the other. Okay, so continuing on the Mishnah now at the top of Amud Bet. Now, so we've discussed 4 cases whereby you have one continuous prohibition, whereby a person continues to get might get different sets of Makkot depending on how the Hatra was done. Now, we have a case whereby there is only one action which is being performed, but that action contains within it many different isurim. So we say like this: Yesh choresh telem echad v'chayav alav mishum shmon elav. Okay, so you could have a scenario whereby a person is plowing in a field, and with that action, that one action of plowing, is actually going to be have 8 different prohibitions. How so? We'll see. The truth is there could be many more, but there could be at least 8. So how would that be? So says the Mishnah. I'll just read through and then we'll translate. It says and explain. It says achoresh b'shov v'chamor ve'en mukdashin v'kilayim bakerem ubashvit ve'yom tov v'kohen v'nazir b'beit hatumah. Okay, so what is the case? The case is a person is plowing. Number one, it says achoresh b'shov v'chamor. Plowing with an ox and a donkey together. So that is the first prohibition, because it says lo tachrosh. Excuse me. Lo tachrosh b'shov v'chamor yachdav. This is kilei be'ema. One is not allowed to plow with those 2 animals together. So that in itself is a prohibition. By the way, there's this is one example where the Rishonim learn. Very interesting. We know that there's an Isur from the Torah. Well, whether from the Torah or not, we'll see in a minute. There's a prohibition of Tsar Balei Chayim, right, of causing unnecessary suffering to animals. So there is a debate in the Rishonim whether the Isur of Tsar Balei Chayim is Doraita or Midrabanan. Most opinions seem to hold, and this seems to be the mainstream view, that Tsar Balei Chayim is an Isur Deoraita. It is a Torah prohibition. The Rambam, for example, is a very interesting limud where he says this is from. The Rambam says in Moreh Nevuchim, he says, where do we know that there's a prohibition of causing suffering to animals? He says, we learn it from the donkey of Bilam. We learn it from there. How can you learn from that story? Halacha. But nowhere in the Torah does it say, Lo tetzaer balei chayim, right? We don't find in that language, we don't find explicit love of tzar balei chayim. So many other Rishonim go through and say one of the answers is that there are specific lavim, there are specific prohibitions from which we learn the general principle that one cannot cause suffering to animals. One of them is lo tarchosh b'shov v'chamor yachdav, that the ox and the donkey, they have different ways, different speeds, different ways of working, and that causing them to plow together would cause suffering. So there are some who learn that from this there's a general principle of Tsar Balei Chayim, which cannot be which is a Torah prohibition. I'll just mention, if I've said it, right, Tsar Balei Chayim does not include shchita. Shchita is permitted. The Torah said shchita is permitted. You're allowed to kill the animal to eat them. That is also not considered Tsar Balei Chayim. This comes up as well. The question is asked regarding euthanasia of pets. Right? Would one be allowed to? Is that considered Tsar Balei Chayim? The poskim say that the dafka there, no. Obviously, animals are different to people. But an animal, you have a pet which is old or which is sick, is one allowed to put it down, so to speak? So the poskim say yes, that is not considered suffering. That is actually alleviating the suffering. And again, it's not a human being. There, the din would be very, very different. One other point is that in terms of medicines and testing and things on animals over there. So the Ramah points out, based on the Trumat Hadeshet, that this principle of Tsar Balei Chayim, that one is not allowed to cause unnecessary suffering to animals. And again, one should try and alleviate it wherever possible. But again, animals are not considered the same as human beings. And therefore, if there is an important human need, which cannot be achieved without causing some sort of tzar to the animals, that would be permitted. And therefore, if you're testing medicines in a way that's going to save lives, and obviously it should be done in the most delicate way possible, and should be done in the most compassionate way possible. But if it needs to be tested on animals in order for that to be to know if this medicine is going to work on human beings as well, that would be permitted. Many tshuvas written on that. So, but that is the first prohibition over here. That plowing with the ox and the donkey together. So that is number one. Number two, it's actually number two and number three, which says, V'hein mukdashin that they are mukdashin, right? They are sanctified. They are set aside to the Beit HaMikdash, but or for whatever purposes of hekdesh. Both the two animals which you're using here. So a shor and a chamor. So a shor, as we know, is a kosher animal. So that could be offered as a korban. So if you have a bechor shor, right, the shor which is a firstborn needs to be brought to the kohen, and you're not allowed to work it. That is regarding the shor. Regarding the chamor, also a chamor, a donkey, is an exception. That is the only place we find where a non-kosher animal has a special din of sanctity regarding the firstborn, what's called Peter Chamor. So if this particular ox and this particular donkey with which you are plowing, each one of them is the firstborn, so therefore that is already 3 prohibitions. That this particular shor, you cannot work it, you cannot use it to plow. This particular chamor, you cannot use it to plow either, and you cannot plow them together. So we're up to 3. Okay. So again, yesh choresh telem echad v'chalav alav. So that was 1. V'hein mukdashin, that is now 3. The kilayim bakerem, what are they plowing? They're plowing in a field that has got kilayim, or in a vineyard, right, where you have on the ground, you have the seeds of grapes together with the seeds of other grains, other vegetables, which is a prohibited mixture. And therefore, you're going to be. The pasuk says, "Lo tizra karmacha kilayim." You cannot plant kilayim in your vineyard, right? You cannot put forbidden a mixture of these species together. Over here, we're not planting. Over here, we're plowing. So the Gemara is going to explain that what it's talking about is if the seeds are there on the ground and you cover them up with dust. That is already considered like planting, and that is considered to be the prohibition of kilayim. That is one understanding. There is another understanding. There's a machloket tanaim, which the Gemara is going to bring. That regarding kilayim, is there just a prohibition? We spoke before whether the prohibition is on the action in the first place or on the outcome. Right? This might be another place where you see it. Because when it comes to kilayim, certainly there's a prohibition of planting the kilayim together, but if it's already been planted, then what? I didn't do it, or somebody else planted it, or I planted it already, and what do I have to do? So there is an opinion of Rabbi Akiva that one has to go and uproot the kilayim, and by not uprooting them, you are transgressing. By the way, just if we're talking about kilayim, there are different types of kilayim as we've seen. So we've already mentioned a few of them. There's kilei habeged, which is shatnez, where you have forbidden mixture in your garments. There's also kilayim when it comes to plant species around the vineyard, kilayim when it comes to animals, right? In terms of the produce that comes of kilayim, so yeah, we're talking about kilei akarem, but if you have different species, for example, a pear, which is a hybrid of 2 species, which was forbidden in the first place, and so we say you're not allowed to create the kilayim of those species, but once it's been done, you're allowed to benefit and you're allowed to eat it. There's actually a Ramban ala Torah that talks about kilayim in general, from which many take this Ramban as sort of a general principle and philosophy in terms of how we are to relate to new technologies and new inventions and things in the world. There's always this question when you create new things in the world, or we spoke a lot on Shavuot about technology. Is there something that the Torah encourages us to do, or is there something which is playing God, so to speak? And there are different sources and different ways to relate to it. But the Ramban essentially says that one of the reasons for the prohibition of kilayim, right, God did good enough job in creation, doesn't need our help. So you're allowed to you are different fruit species and things, you are allowed to benefit from them. So it's complex. It's a complex thing. But in any event, here, what we're saying is that you have the kilayim, the kilei akarem. When you are plowing, you are pushing the dust over the seeds of the various species which could not be planted together. So that is going to be the isur of kilei akarem. So that is 4. Okay, number 5, ubashvit. When is this being done? This is being done in the Shemitah year. There is a prohibition to plow in the Shemitah year, right? The pasuk in Parshat Bahar tells us, "Pashana shvit sadcha lo tizra," don't plant your field. And as we've just explained, that if you are plowing in such a way, you're covering up the seeds, that is going to be like planting as well. So that is shvit. And then the next one is, so how many are we on now? That's, I think, 5. So number 6 is the Yom Tov. Not only are you doing it in the Shmita year, but you are doing it on Yom Tov as well. There's obviously a prohibition to plow on Yom Tov. By the way, you might have thought, why would plowing be forbidden on Yom Tov? I know that plowing is forbidden on Shabbat. On Yom Tov, we are allowed to do melachot, which are ochel nefesh. So you might come along and argue and say, wait a minute, on Yom Tov you're allowed to cook. Why can't you're actually allowed to, in theory, in practice doesn't work today, but in theory you'd be allowed to do shchita on Yom Tov as well. Once upon a time they would slaughter the animal on Yom Tov and then salt it and eat it. So what about, you're plowing and you're planting, etc. So the answer, there are different reasons. Everybody agrees that you cannot plow on Yom Tov. That's explicit from the Mishnah, explicit in other places as well. There is a distinction made between different melachot. We're going to talk later on about how we distinguish between melachot on Yom Tov. But there's a distinction between certainly melachot relating to food. So maybe the easiest way to explain it is there are melachot relating to food which are done in the house, and there are melachot relating to food which are done in the field. Those things which are done in the field are far, far, far more removed. Right? The idea is that ochel nefesh is allowed on Yom Tov in a way that's going to allow you to eat on Yom Tov, something which takes a lot of preparation and a lot of work, either because it's going to be more of a tirchai or because it's going to take a lot longer. Different nuances are brought in the Rishonim, but essentially charisha, plowing, and so too with planting and even harvesting, are seen as melachot which are done in the field. They're not seen as melachot which are done in the house, and therefore do not provide the immediate benefit of ochel nefesh. And therefore, according to everybody, charisha is going to be forbidden on Yom Tov. Right? So we've said again, that the charisha of the shor and the chamor, each one of them on their own, are forbidden in this case because they are muktashim. Plus to plow them together. Plus the fact that you're plowing kilei akerem. Plus the fact that you're plowing on Yom Tov and in Shvit, in the Shemitah year. So we're up to 6. There's a question that the Rishonim ask about Shvit and Yom Tov, which is that we generally have a principle, and we'll discuss it more. We generally have a principle of, we say, ein isur halal isur, that if you have an action which is prohibited, right, and then another isur, we say once it already is forbidden, we don't add on and have another isur as well, unless that maybe add something new or add something different. And the question is, if it was already forbidden in the Shvit to plow, why on Yom Tov would you say that there's an additional additional chiyuv Makkot for Yom Tov, because there was already the prohibition for Shvit, and we'd say ein isur halal isur. So one of the exceptions, there are many exceptions, a number of exceptions to this principle, is when the two isurim come along at the same time. I.e., if at the time when one thing was prohibited, all these different prohibitions applied together, then it's not isur al isur, it's just that there are two isurim here, or more. So some Rishonim say this is specifically talking about which Yom Tov? It's talking about the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah in the Shvit. Because when Shvit begins on Rosh Hashanah, that is the day that is both Shvit and both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Tov, and that prohibition of plowing kicks in, both of them together. Okay, the last two that the Mishnah gives are a little bit different. Meaning, until now, each of the reasons we had for this chiyuv malkut, for this solav, all relate to the same action. All of them are related to the act of plowing. It's that this donkey can't plow, or they can't plow together, or they can't plow where they're plowing, or they can't plow when they're plowing. And now it says there are another two isurim which are included. Again, this will be a bit of a point of contention, but it says, and you'll see immediately why, the kohen v'nazir b'beit hatuma. The person who is plowing, the person who's organizing all this, right, is both a kohen and a nazir, so that we get to 7 and 8, a kohen and a nazir. And it's in B'beit HaTumah, meaning the place, the area, the field where they are plowing is where there are dead bodies. and therefore both a Kohen and a Nazir are prohibited from coming into contact, of coming into a Tumat Meit. So they are there. They are there's an extra 2 prohibitions. So you can see. So the point is that this person is getting Makkot 8 times for what he's doing by virtue of the fact of plowing. The last 2 examples we gave are a little bit different. That's just because he's there, but that's not because of the plowing itself. So says the Mishnah now, Chananya ben Chachinai Omer, Af alovesh kilayim. So Chananya ben Chachinai says to Tanakama, you want to say you can get 8 lavim? I'll give you 9 lavim, right? We can add on an extra. And what is it? Why? He says Af alovesh kilayim, that the person who is plowing not only is he a Kohen and a Nazir, he's also wearing kilayim at the same time. And if he's wearing kilayim, so through that action, he's also going to get an extra set of lavim. So says the Tanakama, says the Mishnah, Amrullah Eino Hashem. Says, what are you talking about? Yeah, of course, a person could be doing all sorts of things, right? But what's that got to do with anything? What's the fact that he's wearing kilayim got to do with the fact that he's plowing? Have a look at Rivan. Rivan on the second last of the narrow lines. He says, Eino Hashem. He says, Eino lavzen ilkat alav mishum charisha ela mishum levisha. Says this lav has got nothing to do. Everything else has got to do with charisha. The fact that he's plowing has got nothing to do with charisha. This has got to do with the fact that he's wearing kilayim. It's something else. You could come up with hundreds of extra things. So he answers back. Chananya ben Chachinai amar lahem af hanazir lo Hashem. He says, okay, but you listed 8 things together. You also included the case of the fact that he's a Nazir. And again, Rivan points out over here, Nazir for Kohen, Kamav lo diek, not just Nazir, but also Kohen's, 2 out of the 8. And it says, Eino Hashem. This is also not got anything to do with the Charisha. It says, Rivan, Ein lav shelo, ba'alav mishum Charisha, ela mishum knisa sh'nechnas l'makom tumah. It's also not because of the fact that he's plowing, but it's because of the fact that he's standing there in a place of tumah. Okay, so that is a machloket between them. Do you count that? Do you count that together? You could say on the one hand, it's a different action. It's not the same. You could say he's only standing there by virtue of the fact that he's plowing, and therefore it's connected. That is the machloket over here. Okay. Says the Gemara. So we said, before we got into this, with the previous case we discussed was regarding kilayim. We said a person is wearing kilayim kol hayom kulo. He's only going to be lokeh once, but if he's going to be, he gets different hatraot, and each time he's poshet v'lovesh, then he's going to get each time is going to be a new chiyuv. So Marav Bibi Marav Yossi poshet v'lovesh lovesh mamash, or okay, so that part is in brackets, so some would remove that. I think there was a note here in the Masoret HaShas, right, who includes this, right? You can see there in bold. It says Tzarech Lamar Marav Bibi Amarav Asi lo poshet v'lovesh mamash ela. Okay, so it's a different girsa. So the girsa of the Masoret HaShas is that where he says that Rav Bibi Amarav Asi says when the Mishnah says poshet v'lovesh, it doesn't actually mean you have to completely take off the garment and put it on. Rather, that even if he just removes his hand from the sleeve, right, and then puts that back in, that is enough, because that is considered that he's putting on the garment, and he would be for that he would be chayav. Right, Rivan says, he puts in and takes out his hand from the sleeve. That is similar. That is the same as taking it off and putting it on, the entire garment. Okay. So that is the opinion of Rav Bibi. Then says the Gemara, Machvi Rav Acha, Braid Rav Ika, Ayule Vafuke. So Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, he would demonstrate. We've seen a lot on the stuff of demonstration takes place. The Amoraim teach us that it's not enough just to talk about things. You have to show, you have to explain exactly, you have to demonstrate in a way that Talmidim will understand. So he was showing them how, obviously, he was not wearing kilayim, but he showed them how, what this refers to and he says ayule vafuke, meaning you would take it off and put it back on. Meaning, no, not just the sleeve. One would have to remove and put back on the entire garment. That is the opinion of Rav Acha. Rav Ashi Omer. Rav Ashi is the most, I would say lenient, but actually most stringent opinion here. Rav Ashi Omer afilu lo shaha ela kedei lifshot v'lebosh chayav. So Rav Ashi says, no, it doesn't mean. So we have one opinion that says it's just enough to take out and put on the sleeve. We have a second opinion that says, no, not the sleeve, the entire garment. Rav Ashi says, you don't even have to take it off. When the Mishnah says poshet v'lovesh, doesn't actually mean poshet v'lovesh. It just means shaha kedei lifshot v'lebosh. You waited the amount of time in which you could then, and then by virtue of the fact that you have that you have the kilayim on you, I guess that you didn't take it off, that would be enough to be chayav. Okay, so there we get to the two dots, and then we'll just start the next part. We don't really have time to go into it now, but we'll just start and we will continue Bezrat Hashem next week. So the Gemara said, Yesh choresh telem echad. We have this case whereby plowing one area would be chayav for 8 or 9 lavim, however you count it. So it says, Amar Rabbi Yanai, b'chavora nimnu v'gamru. B'chavora here is a mean they were right sitting together in the chavora from Lashon Chibur. From the Chachamim were sitting together. It does not mean a chabura, which is a wound, which we find in different contexts. But they were sitting together and nimnu v'gamru. Right, they established the halacha for the following matter. They established halacha as follows. Hachofef bekilayim loke. So somebody who is, this is what we explained before, somebody who covers up, you have kilayim on the ground and you cover them up with dirt, that is going to be chiyuv malkut. That is going to be considered as if one planted kilayim. So the Gemara is now going to say, so Rabbi Yanai says, Rabbi Yanai presents as if it's some sort of chiddush. Or really that all the Chachamim and the Chavurah, they nimnu v'gamru, that they came and they established this halacha. But Amar and Rabbi Yochanan, Lav Mishnah Tainu, he says, what are we doing? He says, this is already an established principle. We already find it in our Mishnah, because by the fact that one of the Isurim of Iyah is Kilei HaKerem. And how else, says Rabbi Yochanan, how else can you explain the Mishnah? Then it's exactly this case of Hachofeh Bekilayim, that when the Shor and the Chamor were plowing, that they covered up the dirt, that covered up those seeds. If we already have that, if we don't need Nimnu V'Gamru to establish the Salacha is already established, and that's already what it is. Is the Malan Rabbi Yochanan, Laf Mishnah Tainu, is this not what we already find in our Mishnah? Yesh cholesh telem echad v'chalav alav mishum shmone lavin, hacholesh pashol v'chamor v'en muktashin v'kilayim v'kelem. Right, so that's a quote from our Mishnah. He says, "I cholesh dim mechayev." This plower is going to be chayav mishum kilayim echi mishkachad la. How can it be? How can he be chayav for kilayim? Surely it is lav the michse bahadei da'azer, that it gets covered up as they are plowing. It's covered up with the it's covered up with the dirt. So they're going to answer back to him. They're going to say, you're only saying that that is the way to learn the Mishnah because of what we've now established, this principle. However, there is theoretically a different way of learning the Mishnah. So we'll stop over there for today, and we will pick up from there, Bezrat Hashem, next week. Everybody have a wonderful day. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you very much, Ishko.
Thank you. Thank you.